So welcome to this webinar. Today we're going to be talking about recruiting in 2022, challenges, trends, and tips. We are going to allow some more minutes, some more time for some of our guests to join, but really very excited today to record this session and really have our very special guests, Jenifer Swaine, VP of Global Talent Acquisition at Catalent, as well as Erin, Cowhig, Chief People Officer at Nimbus Therapeutics, Talenya, CEO and co-founder, Gal Almog, and then myself, Managing Director at Talenya. Really, for today, really excited to have everyone and allow for questions and answers through the chat feature in this webinar. But primarily, we're going to be, focused on bringing in, some conversation on recruiting, given our expert panel today. And so, for a beginning, I'd love to, let our panelists introduce themselves, their backgrounds, really their experience within human resources. Erin, would you be okay to first introduce?
Sure. Pleasure to be here with all of you today. My name is Erin Cowhig. I'm Chief People Officer at Nimbus Therapeutics. Nimbus is a small biotech company based in Cambridge, Massachusetts. We design small molecule therapies using our expertise in structural biology, computational chemistry, molecular sciences to treat diseases primarily in the area of immunology, immuno-oncology, and oncology. So happy to be here with all of you. Prior to that, I should say I was a VP at Vertex Pharmaceuticals, and I've worked in several organizations in the life sciences and other industries as well.
Thank you, Erin. That's wonderful. Jenifer, would you like to say something about yourself? Introduce?
Sure. Good morning. My name is Jenifer Swaine. I'm currently the Vice President of Talent Acquisition at Catalent Pharma Solutions. We are a B2B company. Many of you may have never heard of us. We sit squarely between the pharmaceutical companies. We are a contract development and manufacturing organization. So we take molecules, or we take fully formed pharmaceuticals and manufacture them on behalf of our clients and then return them in the safe hands of our clients. I lead a team of about 100 recruiters, sourcers internationally. My background prior to Catalent is across a variety of industries: consumer durables, luxury retail, and financial services, predominantly as an HR business partner, but had the pleasure of stumbling into heading up a TA team about 3 or 4 years ago. And have found a great home leading the initiatives that we're doing here at Catalent today.
That's outstanding. Thanks for that, Jenifer. Then Gal wanted to introduce, if you can give an introduction on yourself as well.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Gal Almog. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Talenya. Talenya is a technology company in the area of talent sourcing. We developed the world's first fully automated talent sourcing solution that lets you add like a virtual recruiter to your team and search across a database of 1.5 billion profiles, prioritize candidates and reach out to them and invite them to interview with you. So the outcome of our solution is a bunch of interviews that a company can have with what used to be passive job seekers turned into active job seeker and push into the ATS in a fully automated way. We also specialize in diversity sourcing. We have the ability to identify who is who, minorities and women, and refine the search to target those specific populations and allow them to have an equal playing field as far as being considered for roles without giving them any preferential treatment. So it's all about AI, technology, and the ability to bring more efficiency into the sourcing process and cost cutting.
That's wonderful. So we're definitely going to be having questions across all fronts. For everyone in the webinar, we're going to be allowing you to post questions, and there's a Q&A section for the last 10 to 15 minutes of this call, but feel free to keep those posts there. I'll be controlling that. I'll be hosting. Myself, managing director at Talenya, really in touch with all the customer and recruiter interaction, former recruiter myself, and really excited to be having this chat on challenges and really how AI and technology can help us in 2022. And so a really good group of experienced panelists here today, really within the pharmaceutical and also outside of the pharmaceutical industry. So I mean, some really good experience, also coming at the large company organization and also smaller company organization as well. And so I guess first, as we're first looking at 2022, wanted to ask the panel really, are there any first challenges that really do come to mind, as we begin the year, pandemic, obviously in the back of everyone's mind, work from home. Jenifer, how has your experience kind of viewed some of the more recent challenges for 2022?
Sure. I mean, I think we all would probably have the same initial answer, which is it's the fiercest market for competing for talent that I've ever experienced in my entire career, and at every level. I think we all know there's been certain times where there was certain niche roles. This seems to be a little bit of everywhere. I think for us as an organization, our growth has always been, adding in staff, and we are seeing for the first time the amount of hiring we're doing just because of turnover. So, we have implored upon our leaders that our #1 recruiting tool right now is retention. And so we're certainly doing a tremendous amount internally to understand why people are leaving the organization and what we can do to keep them. But we also know that we need to rethink our historical philosophies on a lot of things, flexibility being one of them. I think we are having a difficult time getting people back in the office. And we happen to be an organization where 70% of our workforce was on site throughout the pandemic. But we also know that recruiting for talent in the future, we know that the word flexibility in a job description will 100% help. But as an organization, we also know that we need to pivot to have a greater tolerance for what flexible work will look like in the future.
Jenifer, everyone needs to know that your company manufactures the COVID vaccine, right?
We do. We do have the wonderful partnership of helping manufacture 3 of the COVID vaccines. So we certainly had explosive growth. We hired more people in 2020 and 2021 than we had in historical years. So we were in a very fortunate position of being able to offer employment to many, many people through the pandemic and keep our people safe. It was no easy feat. But when you talk about being able to sell in the culture and a patient-first mindset to potential candidates, we fortunately had a very good story to tell.
For sure. We all thank you. I got 4 shots.
Yes, we appreciate that. I'll add to what Jenifer said. Yeah, I mean, it is by far the most competitive talent market that I've ever experienced as well. I would say specifically in biotech, what we're seeing is growth fueled by a ton of investment over the past couple of years. So similar to what Jenifer said, we grew and our industry grew quite significantly throughout the pandemic. And what that's created is a lot of competition for the same types of talent. So one of the challenges we are seeing is a lot of wage and title inflation, which makes it really difficult because you're trying to hire quickly and you're trying to support a lot of growth, but you're also trying to assess truly what are the experiences and capabilities people are bringing to the table, because it's not always easy to tell based upon kind of title or salary expectations. And so as you're trying to build something that's really sustainable, that's a bit of a risk, because there are a lot of people who think it will start to correct in terms of people who have taken these big jobs and big titles who aren't really equipped to do that. But that's that's not in the best interest of the individual or the company. So I'd say, continuing to navigate that has been extremely challenging and will be throughout this year.
No, it's definitely a very good theme to highlight, and it's this idea that we need to pivot, that we need to change. And so I guess just further on that topic, are there any specific tips for speaking to your team internally on needs to pivot or title inflation, wage inflation? Is there anything that you could maybe pass on with the crowd? Some advice?
I think we have a lot of internal conversations. My recruiting team is, we're somewhat lucky in that we tend to be, we're lucky in that we tend to be looking for highly specialized, highly technical roles. But I think sometimes the challenge is not building a big enough pool, which is where technology and doing really great sourcing helps, because the fewer options you have, the more boxed in you feel when someone is coming to you, but you've invested a lot of time and attention and maybe you don't have a lot of people behind them in terms of backup candidates. Like, you feel more pressure to actually engage in what seems like an unrealistic conversation sometimes about title and compensation. So I think doing the work up front to make sure that you can make a really sound decision is important. And so we've been trying to dig into, what does that mean as we're crafting specific roles, as we're thinking about requirements for a position, as we're thinking about what a hiring manager truly really needs. It's just a more refined, nuanced conversation, but having a strong pool of candidates to back that up, I think is the best scenario you can be in.
Sure. Gal, how would you really advise technology to kind of come in to really increase that strong pool of candidates, not only widen, but also, higher in quality as well?
First of all, I'm an employer as well as a technology company. So I'm facing similar challenges. We have people in 4 different countries. And we do have physical offices, except outside the US. In the US, we no longer have physical offices, just a mailbox, which is quite amazing. So from management and retention of talent, we need to reboot the way we think. How do we create a unified company? How do we create DNA when we have people in India, Israel, Belarus, and the United States? And even there's a difference between a Texan and a New Yorker, okay, which I've learned. I'm Israeli, by the way. So that reflects on hiring. In the US, we hire everywhere we can find talent. So the opportunities are much bigger. It's not getting easier, but there's more opportunities. I think that, outside technology, and I'll touch on technology in a minute, this is the biggest opportunity I think the talent acquisition market has had in many, many years, just because it's become so difficult to find and hire talent. So we need to think outside the box and employ technologies and strategies that we've never employed before. I'll give just one example, which we use ourselves. Recruitment is all about taking a person who's doing exactly the same job in one company and moving them to doing exactly the same job in another company. It cannot get more difficult than that, because you need to give them a better challenge, a better salary, and sell them the opportunity against 5 other opportunities that are, similar. But why not hire people who can train and become as good as a new recruit in a couple of months? Why not hire from within our company people who are, whose career path is exactly the type of job we're looking to fill, and will feel grateful for the opportunity, and will give them better retention. We know that if people see an opportunity within their company, they're more likely to be retained. And lastly, on the technology, we've created an automated sourcing solution. In some way, this is an unknown to a lot of companies, and to some companies a threat. How would we maintain or change the way we source today when, you know, a machine is doing the sourcing and selection and the engagement for us. But the result is, you know, I'm getting 5 to 10 additional interviews to my pipeline, which I would have had to do manually. So the alternative is to hire another sourcer to do exactly the same thing, tap into the same pool, as opposed to have technology do it for you. The benefits are clear, but the mindset needs to change completely to we have to explore new technology to allow us to achieve our goals. And I don't believe that without embracing, and when I say embracing, I mean embracing in a full sense, new technology, changing the way people operate and change their mindset, companies will not be able to achieve their goals.
No, very, very interesting points, very good points. I'm now thinking, you know, former recruiter myself, really for your team of recruiters, Jenifer, for your team of recruiters, Erin, what kind of constitutes someone to be successful as a recruiter, you know, for your independent, you know, team, whether it's recruiting in a specific department or managing a team of recruiters? What are some of the, I guess, the tools that you equip them with, or the, you know, mindset that you have them have in order to be successful? I know that we talked about flexibility, you know, really thinking in mind of each prospective candidate. Is there anything specific that makes a recruiter successful?
I mean, I think a lot more is asked of recruiters these days than probably were in the past. I look at my team and it's like they're marketers, they're sleuths, they're negotiators. They're kind of the friend of the candidate, right? They're bringing them along on this journey. And, you know, inherent in that is them also fully understanding the business, the needs of the business, so that they can have those real honest conversations with hiring managers who want, you know, this wish list of qualifications, and then the reality of where they can, I don't want to say compromise, but in a tough market, you know, where can we train? Where, you know, would you rather have the job open for 4 months or bring somebody in with, you know, a few of the skills that, you know, that can be trained up along the way? So I think, you know, where my team is successful is they really are sitting with the business, understanding the needs of the business, also recognizing when they stumble upon folks, and there may not be a job open, but they're talented people. How do we infuse them into the organization and find the right home for them, or keep them, you know, keep them touch points as we go along. You know, I think they really foster them on the journey. The other thing that we've really implored upon our recruiters is right now it's all about speed. And the analogy that we joke around quite a bit is, you know, if you are looking for a home and you walk into your dream home, you don't say to your real estate agent, can I see 3 more just like it? Because someone else will buy it. And that's very much how we've been trying to use that analogy with our hiring managers. If you see good, grab it, because in this market, it won't exist. But it's helping our recruiters feel empowered to have those conversations as well.
Jenifer, you know, do the hiring manager go along with that strategy? So you bring them someone good who is not a fit for a specific job. Are they willing to accept that, or that takes additional efforts?
You know, I think we've shown success in some of our sites where we, you know, wanted a very specific profile, and over time we were not able to retain those folks because, you know, they were overqualified or the job wasn't as interesting as they thought it would be. I would say in our more developed business divisions, we have a lot more success. In some of our newer areas, we're still working on that for sure. Fortunately, our senior leadership very much understands that and kind of helps push that message along, but it's a journey for sure.
Yeah, I agree, Jenifer. I mean, you said it well at the beginning, where, I mean, our recruiters are really, I think any recruiter these days is needing to wear several different hats. And to your point, Gal, around the question around influencing hiring managers and senior leaders, I mean, that is a big part of it, because we have that conversation all the time where, you know, we will have recruiting teams, especially people who have been with the company for a little while, who their first response is, that person is great, but I need someone to compare them to. And we are absolutely living in a market where we cannot take that time oftentimes, and we've lost good candidates because of it. So it is part of the job of the recruiter is to be very clear with what are we looking for? What's the benchmark that we're measuring to? And it's not about comparing people to each other, but it's about being really clear about the role, the capabilities, the experiences we need. And if someone checks those boxes, being in a position to move quickly. The other thing that's been really helpful is, we're continually trying to refine our process so that hiring managers understand their role and what they need to be bringing to the table, so we can get that clarity up front, and we're not having to double back, which takes additional time when you're trying to move quickly. If people aren't aligned on exactly what you're looking for in the beginning, it just slows things down. So we've been really trying to put the tools in place to make sure our recruiters can have robust conversations and then continually go back to that to hold everyone accountable, which makes the selection process a little bit easier. But I would say that the best recruiters, I think, also are really creative when it comes to thinking about a job and then thinking about the sort of talent. So Jenifer, you touched on this well, who can ultimately fill that role. And I think that speaks to diversity. And, a lot of times managers have a very kind of, I'm just going to fill the roles that existed before. Right. And there's not, I'm just going to take the job description that I've pulled out 10,000 times and just fill that role. And I'm going to look at the same people. And good recruiters really challenge that, because it's about bringing something that's additive to the team or the business, and then bringing people who are going to contribute to the culture in a different way.
Yeah, no, that's definitely when it comes to recruiters adding value and really understanding the business, understanding the growth of the business, and that, right, you're only going to be held back by the speed in which your team can develop and grow. Tell me, Erin, with your company, with Nimbus Therapeutics, I know that doubling in size, that was really something that had happened. How did you achieve that? And really, what advice can you give if we're looking to replicate?
Yeah, I think so. A couple of different ways. We, caveat, we're a small company. We've been around for 11 years. So really, in the world of startup biotechs, we've been around for a while, but still, growing and building out our infrastructure. And so what we were able to do is be very proactive in terms of understanding what our hiring plan looked like, what were the key areas that we were going to focus in on. And that allowed us to, for example, we had a big push in computational chemistry. There aren't a lot of those individuals out there. So we were able to, work with our leaders who are very well networked. So one of our key pillars is making sure that we're tapping into leaders and tapping into our internal network, because we have scientists who themselves are very networked. And so casting that wide net allowed us to get some really good people in quickly, but also being really thoughtful about the fact that because we weren't at a point where we can scale a lot, and we're not doing big, huge builds. They really are more focused and nuanced. We had to be really thoughtful about, okay, what is our internal recruiter going to drive? Where are we going to partner on certain roles based on level, for example? And just, we came up with a multi-pronged approach. So a lot of times we were also willing to kind of parallel path certain roles to say, like, we may pay a fee on this, but if it's a really critical leadership role, we're going to work it internally and work it externally as well, to make sure that we're kind of getting talent in as quickly as possible.
That's
it's
interesting.
definitely not a long-term. I mean, it's our goal to kind of get to a place of stability within certain functions, knowing that, based upon what we have in our pipeline, what we expect, how far we expect to push things into the clinic. And we were able to make kind of very, very thoughtful decisions about how to invest upfront to get to a point of stability.
Yeah, and I guess, Nimbus Therapeutics, smaller in size, must be very different from larger organization experience within Vertex. Like, how has that changed, or what was different about having a larger, company to fill with regards to, like, alternate vacancies?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and as I think about Vertex and maybe even the build that I did at Agios Pharmaceuticals, which was a smaller, still a biotech, but was doing some building in terms of building out functions like commercial functions and functions with the development, clinical operations, medical affairs. And those were more, you've got a set number of roles, and then you can come up with a role profiles, you can come up with a more traditional sourcing strategy and kind of go at it with a broader approach. Nimbus is much more specific because we're not filling many multiples of roles. They're all kind of individually scoped roles with very specific profiles that we're looking for. So it is a heavier lift in a lot of ways because you're having to spend a lot of time on each individual role as a recruiter versus putting in time, where maybe you can fill 5 to 10 to 15, 20 roles at once, kind of using the same criteria and the same ideal profile.
That makes sense. Yeah, and then I guess, Jenifer, Catalent's hiring across different continents, different levels of experience. I know you have an executive, recruiting team as well. You have, tell me about some of the, I guess, the challenges or I guess ways that you've been able to, kind of not really provide one size fits all approaches, but you've been able to help, equip everyone with the same basic training, and then they can approach their desk and individually.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest challenges. You okay? Okay. I think one of the biggest challenges we face is we're not a household name, and we'll never be a household name. So we are absolutely a kind of company of storytellers. And so I think once people hear the story, they understand who we are, they understand what we do. We become, interesting and intriguing to candidates. So, one thing we ensure that we do universally is that the Catalent story is something that everybody's telling, and they're telling the same, regardless of if you're sitting in, Limoges, France, or Bloomington, Indiana. And so that's as a company, we open a lot of our events with a patient-first story, a story about how something we did or one of the products that we manufactured impacted someone's life. I think that does resonate very well with candidates. So that's really kind of a theme that exists everywhere. We deploy a lot of solutions that are kind of global Catalent level solutions, but then we recognize that so much of what the team needs to do is really then figure out how to translate it and deploy it locally, which may be very different. We have certain sites where people can walk right across the street to another competitor. And so how are we differentiating ourselves in that particular market with whatever that particular site is involved with? And I think that does resonate with candidates really well. They can understand we are a dynamically changing business. Our business is all based on, accounts we land, business wins. And so, we will never be at a stable place of recruitment because we always need to make sure that we are staffing up to whatever's coming in the door. But we do a lot to then have the team pivot to local partnerships, local stories, local campaigns that will impact a particular market, because we do sometimes have big initiatives where I need 50 of the same thing in a particular manufacturing plant. And then I have other locations where we need very highly technical skills, kind of how Erin was talking. And we do divide the team up to be able to pivot to have that both global and local strategy.
That's outstanding. I think that's, being able to differentiate, being able to really, take this global strategy and apply it to your local market is definitely going to be crucial so that you can connect and really, speak to these prospects that really, there's with brand recognition, I guess, they need to learn more about what's available, what does Catalent do, and then I guess in the messaging and trying to reach out, is there a specific benchmark with the number of outgoing messages or kind of keeping in contact with valuable candidates? Is there like a use of kind of reusing your database, or is it always trying to go out and try to find new talent?
Yeah, so I would say that's been a big shift for us this year. I kind of upskilled or up-talented my employment branding department, so that somebody is really spending all day, every day, understanding what we need to be doing from an employment branding perspective, both understanding the data, understanding how candidates are engaging with our site, where they're spending time, where we're losing them, Then also really doing pointed campaigns for all the different types of recruiting needs that we have. But then also figuring out what the right cadence is so that we are engaging with people just enough without being annoying. And then figuring out how that will kind of turn into conversions. But I'll tell you, like, we're at the very beginning of that journey. There's a lot to be done, but it will become a, you know, there's so much data out there, and it's really just figuring out how do we continue to engage people, not lose them, not annoy them. But again, for us, it's all in that storytelling. So it's also having just constant, fresh content to be able to push out to folks to just continue to identify with the brand.
Yeah, Michael, I'd like to add to that. You know, messaging and branding are crucial, but you know, we see a lot of companies. We have a perspective of how different companies source and engage with the talent they need to hire in a very competitive market. And my observation is that there's a lot to do. And I can tell you very quickly whether a company is going to be successful or mediocrely successful with us, just based on their process. We have clients that take the candidate through a journey, I would say a very long journey before they are picking up the phone and speaking with them. And in our case, we speak about passive job seeker who may or may not be interested in a new job, but willing to listen. And now the company says, okay, before we talk to you, please fill out this 7-page application form. And I say, you know, these guys have not applied to your job. They're not even ready to apply. They want to listen. They need to be sold on the opportunity. You need to speak with them. And only after you tell them, yes, you qualify and would like to continue with you, then you give them a formal form to fill out. In many companies that we work with, talent acquisition has little say in terms of what needs to be done to get a candidate in the process. It's about, you know, privacy, liability, legalities, and this and that sometimes are, you know, more important than getting the right talent. And I think some rethinking needs to be done in that area between talent acquisition without violating any legalities. It's just a question, when do you ask them to do those tasks, okay? They say, I'm interested, I'm willing to talk to you, stop, and we see a lot of churn. People say, if you treat me this way, I have no interest to listen further. So this is my observation on that. And there's some companies who are just fantastic. They say, we'll talk to you. And even if your profile is not 100% perfect, you've seen a job description, you feel like you are qualified, we'd like to learn about you and maybe see whether there's a fit or not before. And a lot of recruiters are used to, because of the complexity and the time consuming effort of engaging with candidates, they want to engage with 100% qualified candidates. It's all on paper, because if your profile is not perfect, then a recruiter will not call you. It's a shame, because a lot of great talent goes to waste. And I think we need to train our recruiters to look beyond profiles, to look at hints about talent, and talk to a lot more talent who could be qualified, as opposed to disqualifying everyone based on what they show on paper. Would you agree, Erin and Jenifer?
I think you're right. A lot of times our processes get hindered by legal compliance, privacy, the definition of a candidate, of an applicant. I would say at senior levels, we are much more high touch for sure. But I would tell you at lower levels in the organization, because of the volume of candidates that we get, yeah, there's definitely there's things that get in the way of getting candidates forward. I'll tell you what we learned recently in implementing our CRM is we're losing people in the applicant process because our application is just too long. we learned that we're losing people like 4 minutes in and it takes them 12 minutes to fill it out. Okay, we've got to change something. That's the problem.
Yep. Yeah, I've had that experience too. And I think that's why thinking differently where you can about traditional steps like the application processes, is there a way to break it up? I mean, we don't even actually have a formal application at this point in time, which is pretty standard of smaller companies. But I do think engaging candidates earlier on, and this is where the use of technology is helpful, because I do feel like at times, because recruiters have such volume and they have so many roles, so many recs to fill, it is hard for them to take the time and to really think outside the parameters that have been set for them. So if some of that heavy lifting, particularly if you've got recruiters who are doing, kind of the quote unquote account management and then the sourcing aspect of it, if you can make the sourcing aspect of it a little bit easier, then I do think it provides more time for them to dig in, evaluate and engage talent in a different way. And that's where you begin to get some of those, as we think about hiring diverse talent, a lot of times it isn't, you do have to look more closely. You do have to look for those hints, like you were saying, Gal. You do have to ask different questions. And so if you're always using the same process to screen people, you're going to get the same people that you've always gotten. And I think that's what we've seen, where there is, more than at any other time, there is diverse technical specialized talent out there, but it's the processes that we're using that aren't allowing us to always surface those individuals and then interact with them in the right way. So that is, I do think, a miss for a lot of companies out there. And it's hard to get your arms around.
That's wonderful to have comments on, really the process where, right, with so many recs to fill and, the opportunity to reach out and interview, be more high touch with the individuals. If able to have a dedicated sourcing team or some kind of division of the recruitment process, I think that's definitely helpful. Erin, you mentioned, with diversity and being able to focus on, if you ask the same questions, you're going to get the same results.
Yeah.
Tell me, with diversity as a topic and a goal, something that we're trying to achieve, is there anything specific that has been helpful in 2022 or most recently with regards to imparting more with diversity, not just with the recruiters, but with the hiring managers? I'm sure it's a conversation with senior leadership, hiring managers, recruiters, really everyone involved.
Yep. Yeah, there's a couple of different pieces. The first is, I think, setting the expectation up front around, with the hiring manager, understanding what's the makeup of their team, what does diversity mean for them? So that's kind of the first step, because it's going to look different depending on the team, the function, the company. And then really coming up with a recruitment strategy that does include sourcing and kind of thinking about what are the traditional and non-traditional ways to connect with diverse talent. And that's going to look different depending on the role. But it's also then setting expectations with the hiring manager, at times, because you are going to have to maybe cast a wider net or to think about the role differently. It may take a little bit of time. So it's that speed versus quality versus kind of like desired outcome, right? Conversation, which we're always kind of bumping up against. And it's also, when you are working with external partners, it's holding them accountable and setting that expectation that, hey, like don't bring me a pool of people who all look and sound the same. Like, I want a diverse slate of candidates. Like, that's part of what I'm paying you to do that work. There's no reason these days that shouldn't be an expectation if you're a recruitment agency or an exec search firm. So that definitely helps. And then I think for us, really, one of the best pieces of advice I got as we were at a prior company really ramping up in diversity recruitment is, don't put everything that you need under the sun into a job description. It's really about what are the requirements you need for the role. And then that provides you with a little bit more, and you want to have enough in there to guide people, obviously, but you don't want to have so many requirements and preferred qualifications that it becomes restrictive and people get caught up on things like where someone went to school, or, there's a lot of things that I think challenge us, assumptions around, we know that the younger people earlier on in their career do tend to move a little bit more frequently because you know what, they can. And that's not a black mark against them. That means that a lot of times they're talented and they're following their career opportunities. So it's again, like asking people to step back and think differently about the resumes that come across their desk and how what qualifies someone as being a strong qualified candidate. So that was a long-winded answer, but I think there are so many different facets to really thinking about sourcing and attraction of diverse talent. It's super complicated, but it's worth the time to do it.
No, that's so interesting, especially, this idea that by really putting everything under the sun into that job description, you're really encouraging a less diverse response. I think that there really is a lot, and when it comes to just having that decision, that intention to change, I think is already a good starting point. And then, right, with your stakeholders, hiring managers, having the expectation there as well. Jenifer, anything on your end with regards to diversity? What's worked well? What hasn't worked so well?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, like many companies, we haven't cracked that nut, so to speak. We're still on a journey. All of our sites now are responsible for presenting their diversity site plans so that we understand the mix of talent that exists at the site level. But I've also just brought someone onto my team to just focus on where we can improve ourselves in the TA space. So again, we have a ton of data. We know what our pools look like, we know what our slates look like. We know everything along the journey. We need to spend a lot of time in understanding, like, are there places where we are not tapping into enough talent at the front end, or are we losing them along the way, right? And helping our hiring managers with, very basic unconscious bias training, but also understanding, like, how diverse are your panels? Candidates are interviewing us in many ways now far more than we're interviewing them. Are they looking around the room and seeing that this is a place where I feel like I can be 100% my authentic self? And our company happens to be a place where you can bring who you are to the organization. But again, if you're walking into that interview and you don't feel like this is a place where you belong, then we're not doing our job. And so really working with our leaders to make sure that we're creating our environment, making sure our ERGs are involved in that process. As much as we push our referral programs, we also know people tend to refer people that look like them. And that's really a double-edged sword of knowing your referral channel is a great channel, but is it also the channel that's bringing in the greatest amount of diverse talent? So there's an organizational commitment to it at the most senior level for our director and above positions. We require 100% diverse slates, and we have a pretty stiff definition of what a diverse slate looks like. We'd love to implement that through the rest of the organization, but again, it's a journey that we're bringing our leaders on along the way.
Yeah, definitely. Recurring theme. We're still in pilot. We're still in process. It's a journey that we're continuing to fill out with regards to the diversity, also with the new technologies that we're bringing on as well, and also, right, I mean, for Catalent, you mentioned that the customer base is changing very quickly as well, and so we need to make adjustments there. It sounds like with regards to trends, we are going to see more of the employee driven interviews where they're it's not just a one-way interview or interviewing you for a position. It's really, okay, so what does my interview panel look like? Can I be myself? Can I really picture myself with this organization? What about compared to interview number 2, interview number 3? And so I think that that's something very interesting. Definitely, as we continue, technology is going to be involved in that. And Jenifer, it sounds like really, data is really at the core of your approach. When it comes to taking that information, being able to make decisions moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, I come from a very data-driven company, but without a doubt, we have so much information at our disposal, and it really does help with our decision-making processes. So yeah, I mean, we're a very data-driven company. So to the level that it can help, sure, we absolutely use it.
Michael, I'd like to comment on the diversity issue. Because, for regular sourcing, there are many solutions. Talenya is one of them. But as far as diversity sourcing, there are not many solutions other than, searching on LinkedIn and looking at pictures and names and figuring out who is who. But AI can really make the difference. First of all, AI can identify who's who, and AI can give diverse talent a better chance to be considered. And we have clients who use us exclusively for diversity to create a diversity pipeline in the hiring for every job. They all have diversity goals and slates and this and that, but recruiters don't really have good tools to help them achieve those goals. And filling jobs with talent it's difficult in itself, let alone filling it with diversity. But I think AI can really make the difference by being able to target specific populations and get them interested, and then pushing them into the ATS as potential applicants. This is, I think, a breakthrough in the way companies can source for diverse talent.
Yeah, no, really, I think.
Sorry?
Go ahead, Erin, sorry.
No, I just wanted to just acknowledge something that Jenifer said that I think is really important, is using the data that you do have to understand, because it is, the sourcing is the first step, and that's oftentimes the biggest challenge and hurdle. But it is making sure that once you have that great talent on your radar, understanding how they're flowing through the process, because that's what I found at other companies is that, it's even if you are getting that great diverse pool, a lot of times as people move through the process because of unconscious bias, just because of some other, kind of organizational factor or individual factor, they're being weeded out of the process at greater rates than what you would expect. So having, where possible, if you do have that data, having visibility to it can really help you ensure that people are flowing through the way that you would expect they should.
Yeah, really being able to capture and use that data effectively to really help you make the best decision, sound decision as possible. No, I think that, when it comes to, challenges and being able to compare speed versus quality, I think that you're really going to want to, consider what can be done differently, what can be done next, and it's not always so obvious. Okay, no, that sounds really good. There's one comment in the Q&A, really highlighting that, right, with diversity, really a good point, Jenifer, with this idea that the panels really need to be diverse. And so we have someone really acknowledging that being able to hire diverse talent without bias is something that is a challenge. We're definitely still on that journey. We're in the beginning stages of really understanding that for diversity and really for just technology in general, hiring, we're going to be able to allow a lot of new technologies help us with our decisions. I think, Erin, you mentioned with job descriptions, being written in a specific way. Earlier, we were talking about the right cadence, the balance of being really proactive and not annoying. Maybe we're both when we're trying to reach out. But listen, like if you're talented and you have public info online, recruiters are going to reach out to you and really try to offer new opportunities, and that's really what's being expected.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think all of us probably experience that directly to some extent. And so it is, I mean, it's thinking about what stands out for us individually when someone reaches out to us for LinkedIn or some other platform where, it does go back to branding and kind of understanding what's the story and how do you differentiate yourself. Because oftentimes I mean, I feel like every single candidate I've spoken to recently, or my team has spoken to, has other opportunities. It's the exception that they don't. And so having, we try to avoid having, like a form letter that goes out to lots of people where you're just kind of pinging people with the same message over and over again. That's why, thinking about, that's why having internal diversity is so important, because then as you're able to, we're lucky we have a pretty diverse company and a diverse leadership team. And what that enables us to do is to tap into their networks, because what Jenifer said is absolutely the case, that a lot of times with traditional referral programs, you have people pulling in people who are in their networks, and we know that people's networks tend to be made up of people who look like them. So that's the benefit of building that diversity, it just kind of builds upon itself, so that you are able to be really creative about reaching out to particularly really specialized, high-level expert talent, where it's going to take something unique to turn their head. Because most of them aren't looking. Most of them are being chased.
I also want to go back to a point Erin made a few minutes ago, which I think is a really important point. We really talk to our leaders right now about considering untraditional models, right? So we know within the pandemic, an extraordinary number of women left the workforce. They are going to have gaps on their resumes. We know that younger talent tends to job hop far more than people that have been in the workforce for a few more years. We sit around and we have, very candid conversations about, retention, and are we okay with bringing young talent in for, 2 or 3 years and knowing we're going to lose them, and do we adapt to that, excuse me, as just knowing that's going to be part of our staffing model, and pivot how we staff rather than fighting it? Do we lean into it? But we do talk to leaders to say, people will have moved around during the pandemic, or people will have left the workforce during this time. And we need to rethink how we traditionally would have looked at a resume, because there's potentially a lot more to that story than we may have assumed in the past. And how are we going to look at staffing in the future? Because it may look very, very different. If we lose people after 3 years, but they gave us 3 solid years, is that a loss?
You're lucky if you get 3 years.
Well,
yeah, we've been having a lot of those conversations too. I mean, especially, depending on, a lot, if you're in a relatively flat organization, that's just part of, talent acquisition, kind of linking to the broader talent management conversation. And you do have to begin to say, like, is it enough if we've got a couple of good years out of someone? And if we know that, and we can kind of build that into our talent management model and our workforce planning, it allows us to maybe think about talent in a different way. So yeah, we've been having those same conversations, and it is like changing that hiring manager mindset, particularly at the senior levels, to get people to be more flexible.
Yeah, that definitely is something new. This idea that, right, high quality talent will come in and complete a project, and they'll complete like a contract, almost, the same way we have like contract workers, and I'm here just for the CRM implementation, and then I move on to another company where I'm going to focus on just CRM implementation. 100%. This idea of trying to help our hiring manager stakeholders, I guess, think differently compared to, we're going to bring someone on, I'm going to train them, 5 years time, they're going to manage the team, or maybe even sooner than that. There's one of our questions from the audience, really asking is there anything specific that can be applied to express urgency to these hiring manager stakeholders who seem to be holding up the process? Like, the recruiters are able to identify talent, but then hiring managers not moving quick enough. Any advice on that?
So the one thing, I'll go a little bit back to the data for a second. We get a lot of times where leaders come to us saying, the hiring process takes too long, and then they, ask us things like, can we skip background checks and things like that, because we need to get people in. We do show our leaders, one, how long it takes them to approve a requisition, how long it takes us to recruit, how long they sit on resumes, and now we're showing them how many people you lost in that process because you sat on, if you spend a week to look at a resume, half those people, if you're lucky, will still be available. I also think we want to understand what their reluctance is and also what their urgency to hire, because you can't tell me it's urgent to hire if you then become indecisive. And so it's really, again, understanding what's going on in the business and understanding what the process is. I think now we've shown if we don't keep the process moving quickly, we will lose people. This is not a market where we can wait around. I think a lot of our hiring managers are getting there, but it's for sure a journey. And they'll come back and say, well, I'm not seeing as many people as I used to. Well, you're right. There's not as many people in that pipeline. So the ones that we get to you got to grab them fast.
Yeah, it's just reiterating that message over and over and over again. It's data for sure. And I think really challenging, we've done a lot of work to look at, for example, the size of our hiring teams. So when I first started at Nimbus, because it was a small company, and technical expertise is important, but fit is just as important, and making sure that people can really contribute, particularly when you're working in a very team-based, collaborative-based company, which I know, Jenifer, you probably operate in the same way. So we've really had to push on hiring managers to say, you can't have 10 people on the interview process because it just takes way too long. And additionally, it's your decision. You are the hiring manager. So we've really pushed a lot on this idea of, think about what's the information. It's like just any other sort of decision making. What's the amount of information you need to make a good decision? And then let's go with that. But this is not hiring by consensus. So that oftentimes gets managers to move a little bit more quickly because they feel that they understand the accountability is really kind of solely on them. The other thing I wanted to mention, Jenifer, something you said made me think about it, or it might have been something Gal you said, but one thing that we've been trying to do, given the difficulty of the market, is to also be really creative about our workforce planning overall. So we're not every capability, not every project needs to be driven by an FTE, a full-time kind of permanent employee, right? So we've really, that's partly how Nimbus has remained small. We want to remain small intentionally because it allows us to be really innovative and to move really quickly. We have a very robust pipeline beyond what a lot of companies double our size have. And it is because we work in these very leveraged teams where we rely upon trusted contractors, trusted consultants, and really set up our employees. We don't hire a lot of junior level employees. We hire people more mid to senior stage career because we're expecting them to run these huge network teams made up of internal and external resources. And so that provides us flexibility. It allows us to scale where we need to without having to get locked into a lot of permanent headcount, which gives us more flexibility from a talent perspective at times.
That's very interesting. I think that's being small intentionally definitely does have its strong benefits, and I think that we're going to see that as corporations do evolve over time. Some of these more traditional, larger style organizations needing to have to act in a more swift fashion. So I think that's definitely good. So just wanted to ask some of these final questions from the audience and then move on to closing statements. There's one good one that was just asked really about this idea of job hopping and sharing that with hiring managers. I know, Jenifer, you mentioned some of our more recent experiences have shown more junior level applicants have a more prolific history of job hopping. Do you think it's a good idea to really highlight that or talk about that with hiring managers, or should we maybe not talk about that as much?
I think when it comes to the job hopping, I'm always quite curious the contribution the individual made in the time that they were there, right? So, if somebody spends, I know Gal jokes with me about 3 years being, fortunate if someone stays 3 years. Look, if someone stays 3 years, they lived through multiple organizational cycles, and I've got to imagine that they learned it, taught it, and were able to teach it to someone else. For folks that spend shorter amounts of time, and for us, it's really understanding, what was it that they walked into, what was the scope of their responsibility, and what impact and takeaways were they able to make that they could then translate into our organization. Because to someone's earlier point, if I'm just, bringing person from company A to company B in the same role, what did they take away from the previous experience? And if it was substantial and it's meaningful and it's something we can leverage in our organization, then that's great. I think we know that we lose a lot of people because they've been here 9 months, 12 months, and they want, a promotion. And it's like, but you haven't done anything yet. So again, it's also kind of the motivation for why they're moving on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely good to include that as well. So our last couple minutes, I just wanted to ask if there were additional closing thoughts. I think that we had a really good discussion regarding, data, regarding technology, also regarding diversity, and also really the hiring journey and the job seekers journey with regards to coming forward. Erin, any closing thoughts as we kind of conclude our conversation on challenges and trends in 2022 for hiring?
Yeah, I think it's looking at 2022, it is I think the biggest change is just the need to be increasingly proactive. It really is, a lot of us, I think, have been in situations where we can kind of sit back and expect talent to, to come to us, and that is just not the reality anymore. So being thoughtful about going out and engaging the right sort of talent, being creative, and really thinking about how the process needs to change. And I do think it is much more about process and technology. And before, I think people kind of perceive recruitment as being very relationship driven, and that is still the case. But I think it needs to be bolstered by process and technology to really think about it in a more refined way. To get to the right results. And then once you have that, that's where the relationship and kind of the creativity and having the right recruiters who understand the business and what hiring managers are looking for and can tell the right stories come into play.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's fantastic. Thanks for that, Erin. Totally agree. Relationship, process, technology, creativity, just some of the new points that we're going to be considering throughout 2022 and really moving forward. Jenifer, any closing thoughts as we wrap up our conversation on challenges and hiring?
I mean, I agree with Erin completely. I think it's never been a more exciting time to be in talent acquisition. I think there's an opportunity to really become a strategic, partner, our ability to be successful as an organization is going to be enabled by getting the right people in here and keeping them and retaining them. I remember there was a statistic I saw last summer that there was more jobs open for recruiters than there were for software engineers. So I think it's an opportunity for recruiters to really be able to step in and understand the business and have the right tools, and for companies to understand that to really be competitive, we need to have the right tools and information to be able to be effective on our roles, and to then enable the organization to have the talent they need to move forward. So I think it's going to be a beast of a year. Anytime one of my leaders says, "Do you think we're almost at the bottom of this?" I'm like, "No." I wish we were. I think this is going to be a dogfight. I think it's an interesting and exciting challenge, and it'll be stories we tell years and years to come. We'll live through it. But I think we need to position ourselves well to make sure that we are have all the tools we need to be able to effectively move forward.
Absolutely, certainly going to be a dogfight moving forward, 100%. Gal, any final thoughts as we close on the conversation on recruiting?
First of all, I'd like to thank our panelists. It was very insightful and intriguing. I think that we're certainly going into a very exciting and challenging time. I often look at recruitment teams as sales and marketing, bringing leads and converting them into sales. And we used to be in a situation where it was all flowing in. We had our time, we had our process, and pretty much we achieved our goal. Now leads are not coming in, sales are not achieving their goals. And it's not about, becoming less selective. Quality is still a key to growing a company, but we have to be more creative to achieve the same goals. There are not enough talent out there. They want more money than we'd like to pay them, and they want to leave sooner than we would like them. It's just a reality. And unless we adapt and become creative and use technology, we're going to lose. You know, every company was not going to adopt to that. And from my experience, a lot of companies will fail. If you're good, you're going to win because your competitors will not adopt a new strategy as quickly as they should. And it's just a big, big battle for talent that is waging out there.
No, absolutely. I mean, there's definitely a lot of attention and there's a lot of, drive. I think that it is going to remain really an employee's market. And wow, to really think about the different, creative ways that HR organizations can really approach this topic is really incredible. Really want to say thanks to Erin, Jenifer, Gal. Thanks so much for having this really good conversation on challenges and trends in 2022. We're definitely going to see this continue as we evolve, and really appreciate the insights you've shared with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you.